issue is not consolidated yet, so we will cover when the issue settles. Vice President, the reasons for his resignation, it's having a political connotation. So let's just focus on the takeaway for our exam, prelims exam. It is the same as what we have discussed yesterday. Nothing new. Let's move on. Okay. China, India and conflict over Buddhism. Again, nothing new. Today, I want participation from you guys because my role here would be to ask the question, the answer should come from you. What is power? We have discussed this multiple times. Power is the ability to control resources. To control resources. Right. Now, what are the various facets of power? Yes, if I have to simplify the question, if one country has to control resources or control narratives, what are all the things that country would need? Yes? Human resource, okay. See, if you are answering from international relations standpoint, think of institutions first and geographical or economic resources later. What are the policy tools to control? Dividing power into two categories broadly, we can say hard power, soft power. What is hard power? What is hard power, guys? Your military, your economic strength, or the control over resources. It is tangible and it can be quantified. What about soft power? Can you quantify soft power? What is soft power first of all? Soft power is through culture, through an emotional bond, and that emotional bond comes from the way of life. Across the world, what is the fundamental facet of our lifestyle? Religion. If you take the entire world population, the number of people who are religious versus number of people who are atheist, that is, they don't believe in religion and God, who are in majority? Who has faith in God. So religion signifies a way of life, and this lifestyle influences every thought process. It can act as a regulator of our emotions. It can act as an inspiration for our actions on a daily basis, and it gives a structure to our life. When we are talking about any religious philosophy, let's say in this case Buddhism, by controlling the narrative over one religion, we will have influence over millions of people. Buddhism, India is the land of origin for Buddhism, and yet China wants to hijack that narrative and position itself as the central force that is regulating and directing Buddhist thought and philosophy across the world. One of the implication is that the countries which are in immediate vicinity to India, Nepal, China, Tibet, or Bhutan, even Myanmar, all of those countries will gravitate towards China owing to its cultural support. Okay? And this is the meaning of soft power. Now let's see how soft power is acting as a complementary force for hard power. We discussed the five finger policy of Mao. This is a historical, just like how you will have a palm and the five fingers. The palm and the five fingers, the five fingers correspond to the five different regions that China wants to occupy. And this is not something new. If palm is China, the five fingers include the five different regions that China wanted to occupy, annex. For example, you have Taiwan. In India, you have Arunachal Pradesh, Tibet, so on and so forth. There are some regions like that. If India allows that to happen, not only are we losing the hard power, we are also losing the soft power. In this bid, what should India do to protect its positioning as a cultural superpower? Because India is the land that gave birth to almost many new religions like Buddhism, Jainism, and this is also a cradle of civilization. Okay? Why is this happening? Despite having the origin of Buddhism in India, we are not able to assert our cultural prowess. Why is that? Because we do not have institutions. An idea should have a structure to propagate, and that requires institutions. We don't have those cultural institutions. And what does it take for a cultural institution, or any institution for that matter, to survive? This is about governance, GS2. What is the fundamental building block of a good governance structure? It is there in ARC, Administrative Reforms Commission, second ARC report. Can you tell me? The triple F. You need to give them funds. You need to give them functions, meaning you need to give them certain responsibility, legitimate responsibility, meaning through a law. Give them funds, give them functions, and give them skilled manpower, functionaries, which will lead to the fourth F, functionality, the end objective. Okay, so it's like a flavor. Then just like how you while you're cooking, you add various ingredients, right, in different proportions to make the end product very tasty. Governance is the building block of any idea to translate into an outcome. Every governance structure will require this. What do you add to that? This idea. In this case, it is about soft power. No matter which institution you are talking about, for an idea to propagate and go forward, you will need this 3F structure plus a flavor of the respective GS subject. If you're talking about culture, culture is the idea. Culture should go forward. Why should it go forward? We can have a debate on that. Once you have a residue of that final understanding, club it with governance to ensure that that idea is being taken forward. Okay, got my point? Perfect. This is what the article is talking about. Clear? Any doubts? Realities behind the global experiment of remote work. Now, this is about employment. Okay? Employment issues. There are different kinds of employment, formal, informal. when you're talking about remote work, what do you understand by remote work? Work from home. Do you think work from home is possible for all kinds of jobs? No, right? It's possible only when the nature of work is predominantly desk based, where you don't have to physically be present in the location. Okay. In a developed economy, the hallmark of a developed economy is that you will see a rising knowledge economy, that is service sector jobs. Consider fintech, software, or any kind of regulatory jobs. Because across the world, thanks to globalization, you will see that because of globalization, GS1, what is globalization? A process where you will have exchange of ideas, people, and there is a free movement of goods and services, right? If you take a look at the evolution of how economic activities progressed, they begin with, any society will begin with mastering agriculture, then they will move to manufacturing, and then finally the service sector, which is the knowledge based economy. Okay. The peculiar case about India and the world, we have to understand both the situations. Normally, any developed country or the so-called OECD countries, okay, these countries saw this linear trajectory, and this includes even China. Okay. But the case with India, this is the normal trajectory. But the case in India is that without focusing on this much, we had to jump from agriculture to service sector, and that is because of 1991 LPG reforms. The biggest criticism about Indian governance is that we are not proactive, we are reactive. What do you mean by that? We will wait for a crisis to happen and not take actions proactively. For example, in the case of this 1991, we had to wait for a balance of payments crisis to ensure that we are carrying out this economic reforms, which fundamentally change the structure of our economy. In this transition, our hope was we will focus more on manufacturing. But thanks to the IT revolution at that point of time, IT, that is IR 3.0, Industrial Revolution 3.0, which predominantly was about the mix of computers, software, and IT services. Compare that with India and the world. So, let's take the example of US for example. US wants agriculture manufacturing services for its country to survive. What is the nature of agriculture there? Agriculture is concentrated in the hands of a few people. Not a lot of people do agriculture there because it is not that remunerative. Okay, so their wealth, when you have wealth, they will import. They don't waste their time doing agriculture. That is the ideology. Or people who have large tracts of land through farm mechanization. US is fundamentally a capitalist economy. They will carry out agriculture only if it is profitable, and there is a strong interface of both the industry as well as the agricultural sector, contract farming type of thing. So here, in a capitalist economy, agriculture acts as a source of raw materials to the manufacturing industries. Whatever manufacturing industries that are there, food processing industries, of course they will produce, but it is purely driven by cost and not as a lifestyle. Okay. So contrast that with India. In a country like India, where 50% almost, more than 50% in 1991 were depending on agriculture. Okay, so we need to pull people out of that agriculture, put them in a different job by skilling. We did not have time for all of that. We were in a crisis. So what we did was we just announced that anyone can come and do business in India. We are moving away from regulation. You can't set up a manufacturing base, obviously, right? So US, what did they do? I'm just giving one country's example. It's not like US is the only economy. It's a developing world, and I'm talking about US primarily because it is a time which coincided with the global fall down of USSR. There is reducing influence of communism, and capitalism was on a rise. At that point of time, US is considered to be the only force. Okay, so US outsourced manufacturing to China. Low level. Again, when I'm saying manufacturing, don't consider it like a homogeneous thing. Okay. For example, let's say there is a basket of goods. This bottom manufacturing, which is cheap manufacturing, which is considered to be a waste of time, all of this is outsourced to China. When it comes to textiles and other garments, that is outsourced to countries like Bangladesh, India, Vietnam, Philippines. And when it comes to farming, grains, Philippines, Thailand, and all those countries got the outsource. It's like a contract. US gave us these countries a contract, so they can focus on adding value in a better way. Where did they add value? They were already good at manufacturing, higher end products. So in the value chain, because of this globalization, a concept called global value chains came into existence, where the low end products China is manufacturing and the rest of the high value, this is with the hands of US. Okay. Now they focused that, let's say if 100 people are there, previously almost 50 people were involved in manufacturing and agriculture, and the rest 50 were there in service sector. Okay. Now what happened is, after outsourcing this 50 people and creating markets for new avenues, new IT projects, new enterprises, people moved out of that sector, and 80% of the population in the US are now in the service sector, the desk-based job. Even then, they're just not enough. There are not enough skilled professionals. There are not enough projects that can be handled by just the 80%. They needed a global force. And this further accentuated the globalization process. And thanks to the fall of USSR and LPG era, both coincided at the same time. And this gave us an opportunity to completely bypass and skip the manufacturing sector. As a result, even today, our economy is skewed towards service sector, and that is the reason why you will see a lot of young entrepreneurs, when we're talking about new businesses, they usually talk about an app, not setting up a manufacturing base. And that's the idea of enterprise, and that needs to change. We need to manufacture for the country as well as the world, and that's a very lofty vision when you compare yourself with China. It is in this context you should understand this global experiment of remote work. When there is a global discourse on this remote work, what is the kind of population we are looking at in India? A very minuscule population, but very significant nevertheless. Why? 60% 60% of our money, 50 to 60%, is coming from service sector, fintech, IT. fintech, IT, and similar such service-based economy, which are of high value. Right. Now, how do you progress in the value chain? How will you grab the new opportunities in manufacturing which are moving away from China if you don't trust your workforce? The entire narrative around remote working is that it's going to improve productivity. This article is not only questioning the structure of labor, and it is also bringing into focus the whole issue or the efficacy of the idea of remote work. How remote work is considered in the West and in a competitive economy like India is completely different. Boundaries are being erased. It is leading to burnout. When you're asked to work from home, there is no definitive end time that says. Previously, if you're in a office, at least if you're working from the 11 to 8 shift, the time would end there. Right now, the boundaries are being erased. Managers are not respecting those boundaries. They'll set up calls till 10 o'clock. And even employees are like, okay, since we are not traveling, we'll anyway have to travel, right? So they convince themselves. But now this remote structure, how is it impacting society? You've already had this question. Remote work as an idea, when it is institutionalized, remote work is a GS3 concept. For example, the nature of work, okay, employment related. When it is institutionalized, let's say, governance is not only from public standpoint, it can also be from a private standpoint, because corporate governance is also there in our syllabus, right? GS4, corporate governance, values in public and private life. You need to understand this both, public and private life. Okay. In this area, if human rights are being breached, governance from government standpoint, public governance structure should intervene into the corporates only in those scenarios. In this article, the article is only discussing about the efficacy of work from home, remote work, how only a few industries are getting benefit out of it, and what to do to escape the situation. I took a step back and explained you about the various interconnected processes in brainstorming this subject. The very nature and the fundamental structure of how our workforce is designed is inspired from the development of our economic activities. The evolution of economic activities will link this to the workforce. In an economy which is predominantly service based, our entire emphasis is on this salaried class only. But what about our long term vision? Are we aligning ourselves to the long term vision? That is something that we need to think. Yes, work from home is a very good initiative. If done properly, the urbanization agenda will have to see a completely new lens. We'll have to bring out a completely new lens, because Indian economy is unlike any other. It's just like every other world city, global cities. Cities are the engines of economic growth because of a effect of agglomeration economy. Agglomeration economy will bring in other kinds of troubles, like, say, for example, traffic congestion, etc. All of this is linked to the labor structure and the geographical spread or the spatial spread of our workforce. So if India wants to have a future and envisions the so-called Vikasit Bharat by 2047, it's important to translate human beings into human resources with dignity. Please remember this, with dignity. And at every point, this dignity aspect is undermined. And efficiency and hustle culture cannot be promoted when it is not coming from individuals. Okay, but at the same time there should be a culture where any person who is willing to work hard and put in the extra work should also have an opportunity to grow, right? And this is again related to the labor structure. So if you directly look at the article, what does it say? We thought work from home is going to help. It is not helping as much because it is leading to burnout. Of what use is that article if you just understand that? Maybe as a data pointer to quote in your answers. But to take a step back and look at the place of labor force in the whole evolution of the manufacturing story or the whole evolution of the economic structure, in this transition phase, where should India move? What can we learn from the world? That is what I wanted to teach you through this article. Okay? In the future, when any other article comes, always place your understanding in this kind of a structure. It's like a canvas, right? See, this is how I envision. If there is a huge canvas where you paint a painting, and you need to be able to visualize when a topic comes, this canvas of UPSC syllabus should give you an imagination when you look at an article that, okay, I can place this article here, here, here. This visualization is what makes your reading fun and also a sense of clarity. There is a concept called neuroplasticity, where your neurons get aligned when you continuously practice and think. Affirmative learning or reinforcement learning, all of these concepts and how our mind functions predominantly tells us how we should actually study something. Why we are doing newspapers in a wrong way? Because we look at them as sources of information, condense it, store it, and it's not helping us in any way. Use this as a activity that you can plug it and put it in a syllabus context. And this active learning is what sets you apart from the rest of the crowd. Okay, there is a single point takeaway from this. What did you take away from the first article with respect to power? If an idea has to sustain, it should be backed by an institution through governance which requires funds, powers, and skilled people to do that. Universities are the place to nurture those ideas. And if you don't give them funds, link them to politics, if you don't give them functions, that is autonomy on how they should function, and if you don't give them enough skilled professionals, let's say PhD professors, who are producing not just namesake research but something new, universities won't thrive. And that is the same line of thought I want you to deploy here. There's nothing new. In this present scenario, even in the case of United States, funding is curbed for universities due to the political conditions there, and it's not a healthy trend. It's not a good sign for evolution of mankind. That is scientific temper has been the hallmark of human evolution, the civilizational evolution, and that's taking a hit. You have universities which are not questioning, and then people are going to become slaves to a technology like AI which will dictate how you should think, act. There are established research papers from the last couple of years which say that the ability to push and think without the help of AI is reducing. People are resisting. People are resisting to think for themselves because it's very difficult now. And this requires practice. Over dependence of any new technology coupled with things like this is only going to make the whole agenda of enhancing scientific temper take a backseat. Alright. Redeeming India's nuclear power promise. Again, the same thought process I'm going to enforce. When does an idea become a reality? Same thought process. You give them funds, you give them power, you give them functionaries. If you take a look at this article, this is what this article will say. But to make sense of this, you need to, like what did I tell you, this 3F structure is common ingredient of every recipe that we are making. But the idea that is behind that will change. In the case of universities, the idea is scientific temper and how to enhance it. In this case, the idea is nuclear power. The basics behind that. If you have an idea, how do you take it forward? What is the idea here? Idea of nuclear power getting penetrated and its share in our energy mix should increase. Okay? The biggest challenge here is that we are fundamentally afraid of foreign intervention. For example, you have acts like Atomic Energy Act and the Civil Nuclear Liability Act, CL, and Nuclear Damage, Civil, what is that, CLND? Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act. These are the two acts which showcase our philosophy and approach towards atomic energy. If a supplier is giving us raw material and if there is an accident happening at the site, who should be held responsible? Operator or the supplier? See, some food processing company, for example, you are buying a finished product. Let's say you bought a Lay's chips packet, for example, and you found that the chips are spoiled, or they are or any cake or something, it's rotten, there is fungus in that. Who will you catch? Are you going to hold the manufacturer responsible or the farmer who produced the raw materials? But unlike in all these cases, which says that this is common sense, in our case, we are holding the supplier. What is the logic behind that? And why are we trying to do that? I mean, there must be some reason, right? I want you to focus on that. Sorry? Then what about Indian companies like Bhavini? Like, that's what I'm telling you. In what conditions is holding supplier viable? In what conditions it is not? Is this, see, if this is the roadblock which is stopping the penetration of nuclear power, how do we deal with it? How do we negotiate better? That should be our focus. I get your point. It's not like the bureaucrats who came up with this law are dumb or they don't know this common sense point. But there is a very strong logic. When they are going counter to what is there, there is a context to that. There are many nuclear power plants in our country which are operated through the help of a foreign power. That foreign power is usually also the supplier of this nuclear material. When they have complete control over technology, how it is operated and how it is functioning, if something goes wrong, isn't it unfair for Indian counterpart to pay the whole damage? You take the profit, you don't take responsibility. of any damage, but if something goes wrong, I should be responsible. Just because I called you, it's not fair. Yes, I invited you to operate here because I don't have the technology or the raw material. But how fair is it to say that I should pay the entire amount if something goes wrong? Unfair. And the companies think that you are also getting to learn from this process. Why don't you take that risk? Because in the absence of such a framework, you neither take the responsibility nor you are contributing to the research nor the technological prowess. You don't even have the raw materials. Then what are you bringing to the table? Are you going to say that you will take profits only because we are operating in India? Is that your only bit? We are not interested. Two sides of the coin. Both the parties are having a negotiation and each of them have their own concerns. How do we bring them together is the art of negotiation and arriving at a middle ground. And that is the tweak that we need in the laws. Okay? And that is what is discussed in this article. Go through that patiently and link it to energy mix. Here also, there are some Indian counterparts like Bhavini. Okay? And you have AERB. This Atomic Energy Regulatory Board is an institution which is treated as an autonomous body, but it is not given a legal status. If it is not a legal status, it is not given a legal status, what's the point of making it an autonomous body? Because you can't enforce any decisions. And these are the kind of contradictions that you will see throughout this article. I want you to pick up information by applying this framework and keeping a practical bent of mind. That when you have this structure in your mind, what does it take for an idea to translate into a reality? And this 3F framework is necessary for that. What you are supposed to prepare is that idea. This idea part is what is asked in prelims. When you have a clarity on this idea, they will tweak the structure part. For example, when you know the inspiration behind a structure of a governance structure for an institution. For example, now you understood the principle and you understood the act. Here supplier is held liable. You know the backstory behind it. Here in prelims exam, if you are just following some magazines or material, they will just mention it as the damage liability is there on the operator. If you are by-hearting without a context, we are reading magazines without a context. Not like a story, but just as a piece of information. That is not how our mind operates. You need to see and understand our mind to understand the learning methodology. Our mind accepts sensory input. Then it needs time to restructure that with our own understanding. And then it requires a challenge to be applied upon. And that challenge should ideally not be in the final exam. It should be prior to that. So people think test series is that challenge, so they repeat the test series when the methodology of learning itself is flawed. You need to systematize your understanding and put it in a structure so that you can easily apply that. The difference between your college exam and this exam is because your college exam has a sense of predictability. You know what to do, how to do. There is a step-by-step process which is led by your teachers or professors. You do this, do this, do this, and once you have a residue of that final understanding, it will come in the exam, you repeat. It's a linear relation. Unlike in UPSC where you have to manage so many moving parts and systematize them. That becomes a challenge because that is the very nature of this exam. Okay? So today's newspaper, I've used it as an opportunity to talk about this governance and 3F framework so that it becomes natural to you the next time you read any article. And once you understand this, always link it to GS1, GS4. And this is the meaning of neuroplasticity, where learning becomes enhanced through sensory input and repetition of a certain structure again and again. Okay, that's it for the day.